Morning, we're learning as is chus for Shalema Filan Chaya Basarach on the top of Mem Vav Amar Aleph. So the Mishnah said Chutz Min Hadam. This is the Mishnah on the previous Amud. We said all those that lists of things that Dvarim She'ein Lehem Matirim, that don't have a matir, that we said are not, so therefore they're not going to be chayiv if you eat them. If they're pigul, if you eat them, you're not going to be chayiv. You're chayiv for them, nevertheless, for noisa mishum tomei, chutz min hadam. However, dam is an exception. It's an exception to the exception, so to speak. It means even though we say there's dam she'en latirim are chayiv for noisa and tomei, dam you're not going to be chayiv for noisa and tomei. It's an exception. It's not. There's no chiyuv of noisa and tomei for eating dam. Zaktimar chutz and adam mino ani mili. Where does this come from? Amar Ula, Amar Kra. The pasuk says, this is a pasuk, the gabe the din of Meila. Like Rashi says, Amar Ula, Amar Kra. Hadu Ula loy hacha etmar. It sounds like it's a little deceptive because Gemara sounds like Ula is saying giving a pasuk directly, but rather it's on a different topic. Al gabe Meila etmar meseftas Meila tani ein moilim bedam. Well, as we're going to see, there's no din of me'ilah, there's no din of an isser of being nana from kachrim on the dam. Meaning you're not allowed to do it, but it's not going to be chayiv. The din of what the Torah requires from me'ilah, there's a special karbanos, and I think he pays a chaimish back. So the pasuk is anil satam lechem shalachem yehei. So first the pasuk says that it has to be. Where does it come from? So this is what he's saying over there. How do you know that there's no din me'ilah on dam? So first it says v'nisat l'chem shalachem yehei. It's telling you that something of it should be yours. There's something of in that you're moilim him. That it's talking about the dam, right? The pasuk says, "Ki nefesh habasa b'dam hi v'ani nesat l'chem al mizrei l'chapa al nafsho seichem." Ki adam hu b'nefesh yichapa. So the Torah says about dam, in some sense that it's yours. That means that it's excluded from the din me'ilah. The Bei Rabbi Shmuel Tana, Amar Kra l'chaper nasat v'loy l'me'ilah. The Torah, the same pasuk, it says that dam is l'chaper. So it's telling you dam is a kapara, but it's not going to be. It's not going to be. That's its purpose, but its purpose is not that you should be moil in it when you use it. Who lifnei kapara kalach kapara. It's going to remain the same. That it's going to be the same way la'ach kapara. Ma'ach kapara ein by me'ilah. Just like after the carbon is finished, there's no me'ilah. It's only while there's a kedushas haguf, while it's still a carbon, that it has a din of me'ilah. But obviously, the basar of a carbon has no din me'ilah. So we're going to say about the dam, just like la'achar, the kapara, after you're finished with the whole carbon, there's no din of me'ilah. After the kapara, ain't by me'ilah. Correct the Gemara. Maybe I'll say the other way around. Maybe it's telling you exactly the opposite din by dam. Maybe it's telling you a chumrah in dam that most other things after the kapara loses its din me'ilah. Or maybe it's telling you, when it's saying that it's the same la'acha kapara as lefnei kapara, it's telling you that it retains its din of me'ilah after kapara. So Gemara, ein lecha davar shenasis mitzvasa yumaylam bay. The Gemara says, no, this is a hard and fast rule that there's nothing that after you finish the kapara, after you've completed the carbon and there's nothing left to do, that it still has a din me'ilah. Correct the Gemara of Eloi, is this true? V'hari trumas hadeshen. What about trumas hadeshen? So let's see, Rashi about trumas hadeshen, b'chol yoim, chayse b'machte v'toyer mes hadeshen. Every day they would use, this is an avoid in the Beis Hamikdash, avoid of Trumas Hadeshen, that they would take a shovel and take a shovelful of ashes and be tired of the ash and take a little bit from the leftovers from the ash on the mizbeach malay machtam imanda but noise the mizrach shel you put it on the east side of the ramp. The shamu mashma sham gnizasa. The Torah says you should place it. That tells you that that's its final resting place. So sham nivla b'mkayim there, it's going to get absorbed into the earth. Alma asabana. The Torah tells you have to put it there and leave it there, and you're not allowed to do anything with it. So that tells you that it's asabana, even though the avodah, the Trumas Hadashin is completed, this still has a din mi'ila. No, it's true that by mi'ila there's a din that you're not allowed to use it after the completion of the carbon. But mishum dahavi Trumas Hadashin of Big Day Kahuna shnei ksubin abon ka'achad. But Trumas Hadashin and Big Day Kahuna are shnei ksubin abon ka'achad. In addition to Trumas Hadashin, there's also a din of Big Day Kahuna. That Big Day Kahuna after Aaron HaKayin, after the Kayin Gadol completes the Avodah on Yom Kippur, there's an Isser to ever be mishtamish in those begadim. So that's a second place where we see such a concept, that after the Avodah is finished, there's still a din mi'ila, there's still a din Isser hana in the what you used for the carbon, for the Avodah. So Shnei Ksuvim Abba Kachad. Since we have two psukim, too much of a good thing, you have two psukim that say where we have such a thing that you can have an Isser Me'ila, an Isser Hana after the completion of the Avodah. So we can't learn from them, so we're left with the general rule that we never find that after the completion of the Avodah that there's going to be a Isser Me'ila. So therefore, when we say that by Dam, it's Lefnei Kapara, Kala'acha Kapara, we're not going to say it means that even after the kapara, there still is going to be a Isser Mi'ila. But rather it's telling you that Lifnei kapara, there won't be an Isser Mi'ila. And there won't be a Isser, there won't be an Isser Mi'ila. So it's a little strange, right? Because I would say, as much as we're saying that there's no such concept that after the kapara, after the end of the carbon, that there should remain a Isser Mi'ila. There's even more of a rule that while the carbon is in process, while it's still a carbon, that there is a Isser Mi'ila. So we're saying because we never find such a thing, but we also never find such a thing that during the carbon there's no Isser Mi'ila, but we're using the pasuk to tell you that dam is excluded. So it's a little hard for me to understand the thinking behind this. Talking about the Amri, this is good that we said it's going to be Shnei Ksuvim Abon Ka'echad from Trumas Hadashin and the Big Day Kahuna. If you say that Taka by Big Day Kahuna, V'inicham Sham tells you that you have to be Gainas, the begadim of the Kayin Gadol. El Rabdoisa Da'ama Mutara saying the Kayin Hadjit, Bavachal Ishtamish Ben Yom Kippurim Achar. He says it's not an Isser Hana, it's just an Isser, you can't use it twice on Yom Kippur. But you could use the Big Day Kayin Gadol for a big Kayin Hadjit during the year. It's just a V'inicham Sham, meaning not to use it again for Yom Kippur. So we don't have Shnei Ksuvim Abon Ka'echad. So Gemara Mishum Nahavi Trumas Hadashin ve'Egel Arufa Shnei Ksuvim Abon Ka'echad. Instead of Big Day Kahuna, we're going to insert Egel Arufa as the second case where we find that there's a Isser to have Anah even after the completion of the Avodah. That, like Rashi explains, that after you did the Avodah of the Egel Arufa, it's you're not allowed to use it anymore. Arufa, where does it say? Egel Arufa d'chsev arfa sham b'hai sham kro yisehiru loimish hey sham kfurasa. We dash from the word sham by Egel Arufa that it gets buried there and you're not allowed to have any anah from it after the completion of the Avodah of Egel Arufa. So back to having Shnei Ksuvim Abon Ka'echad Ein Melamdim. There's a Madam who says even if you have Shnei Ksuvim Abon Ka'echad, you can still enough of it. So it's not because it's Shnei Ksuvim Abon Ka'echad. It's Trei Miyut Ksivi. Hacha Ksev Harufa, Hasan Ksev Vishamu. It's really that there's miyutim both by arufa, by Egla Rufa, and by the Trumas Hadeshin, that say only on these things do we have that there's an isser to be nana from it, but not by anything else. So it's not that because the Torah was marba them that there's an isser, but it's that there's a miyat that tells you only these things. Like it's only by this and not by others. So that's why we know that over here by dam, it doesn't make sense to say when the Torah says it's not the same before and after the kapara, that it must mean that lifnei kapara it's mutter. Zak Gemara. Okay, so now we've gone on a exploratory journey to figure out the din of meila by dam. Utlasa kroy b'dam lamali. So we had three different shittas, right? We had the first ulama kravanis satav lachem. The Rishmo says amakol chapel kapara, and the other amakra hu lefnei kapara kalacha kapara. So Zak Gemara, what do you need all three psukim? We had three different shittas, each one had a different pasuk. What are we doing with all these psukim? So it's not a machlekes. All three psukim are necessary. Zak Gemara, lemute mimiila minaiser umetuma. We need the pasuk to tell you first of all, like what the direct point of ula was. Minanimili. So we said the first one is to tell you that it's dam is excluded from Mila, and the second one is from Nicer, and the second one is from Tuma. So that is that you're not going to be chayiv eating dam that was left over, and you're not going to be chayiv for eating dam when a person is tummy. Abel pigol light tzarich kra, but pigol we don't need a pasuk to tell you that it's excluded. It's none. Kol sheyeshel matirim bein la'adam bein l'zbeach hayrav v'shum pigol b'dam gufei materhu. Dam. This is that Rashi that I pointed you out on the Mishnah when we were talking about what is excluded from because of the Mishnah had all the things that are dvarim she'ein lahem matirim, and therefore you're not going to be chayiv for eating them if the carbon is pigol. So Rashi had said first of all it has to be davar sheyesh lo matirim, but Rashi also says something that is matir others is also not a davar sheyesh lo matirim. That's also another qualification, and this is the Gemara that's saying that the dam, since it's a matir, it's excluded from if you eat dam. When the carbon is pigol, you're not going to be chay. Zaktumar. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Yochanan said, Shloisha krisis b'shlamim lama. Why do we have three separate psukim that say that there's a din karas by shlamim? So I have to admit, this is really the beginning of the part I was telling Lucy before, that I've tried to learn it a bunch of times, and I'm still not. I'm not entirely clear. I really feel like I don't have it properly. But so let's do it slowly. There are three psukim that impose krisis on someone who eats kosher mituma. Shloisha krisis. So Rashi says, Emor aleim l'deiroseichem. The first one is in Vayikra Chav Beis. In Pasuk Gimel, Emor aleim l'deiroseichem. Kol isha sheyikra mikol zarachem al hakotchem asher yakdishu b'nei Yisrael Hashem v'tumasei olav v'nichasa nefesh ahi milefonai ani Hashem. That's a pasuk for someone who eats kachem while he's tamei, that he gets kares. And then the second pasuk is v'nefesh asher toichal basa zevach mizevach hashlam asher Hashem v'tumasei olav v'nichasa nefesh ahi me'ameh. Second pasuk that's in Vayikra Zayin pasuk Chav. And finally, the next pasuk immediately after that it says v'nefesh kisiga b'chol tamei b'tumas adam oy behema tmeya oy b'chol sheketz tamei. If he eats b'chol tamei b'tumas adam, it's tamei b'tumas adam behema tmeya b'chol sheketz tamei v'acham b'sar zevach hashlam. Person who becomes tamei himself and he eats b'sar zevach hashlam ashel Hashem v'nichas nefesh ahi me'ameh. So what do you need 3 separate creases for? The Gemara. Achas leklal. One is for a general rule, va'achas leprat, and one is lefaret. So Rashi explains, what does that mean? It means we want to make a klal uprat to tell you that it's not just, this is talking about shlom, this psukim are in the parsha of shlomim. It's telling you, kol davar shalom, let's see. Davar shahayi b'chlal v'yotzam leklal, lamad alatzma yotza, lamad alaklal kula yotza. That's the rule that we always say. When you have a klal and a prat, again, this is not a klal uprat to klal, but this is a klal uprat. It's coming to tell you it's not just in the case of shlomim, but all karbanos that is going to be a chiyuv karos for eating a petuma. And then finally, va'achas l'dvarim she'ein nechalim. And one is to tell you on things that are not edible. You have the wood and the levina. These are all things that are not edible. And it's coming to tell you that there's a chiyuv karos on them as well. According to Reb Shimon, who says, in our Mishnah, we'll look at it in a second, just to remind ourselves, he disagrees with the Chacham. He says that there's an exclusion, that there's no karas, there's no iser on dvarim she'ein echalim, on things that are not edible. You're not chayiv for tumah. Lasuya mai, lasuya chatois hapnimius. It's coming to tell you, even the chatois hapnimius, even though we said achas al klal, achas leprat, is telling you that it's a klal uprat and l'lamed ala klal kulay to tell you all karbanos. I might think chatois hapnimius are excluded, even though all other karbanos you're chayiv for eating them, but maybe chatois hapnimius are excluded. Sagad hachamina hayel v'amar of Shimon. Kol she'ein al mizbeach hachitzin k'shlamim ein chayav ala mishum pigel mishum. Since Reb Shimon, like we said before, he said that chatois hapnimius are also excluded from the din of pigel. So mishum tumah nami l'chayiv, maybe tumah should follow the din of pigel, just like chatois hapnimius are excluded from pigel according to Reb Shimon. It should also be excluded from tumah. Kamash malon. That's what we need. The third creases to tell you chatois hapnimius are also going to be mechayiv for eating it betumah. Okay, so let's just go back. So this is really the introduction to the sugya. So let's go back to the Mishnah. We said in the Mishnah, Dvarim she'ein chayav lehem mishum pigel, chayav lehem noisa mishum tameh. Chutz min adam, like we just said, adam is an exception, but generally, Dvarim she'ein lehem matirim, doesn't make a difference as far as the din of noiser and the din tumah. You still, even if it's a davar she'ein lehem matirim, even though that has a different din legabe pigel, it's still going to be chayiv for noiser. If you leave over the kaimitz and you eat it after the zman, you chayiv noiser. And if you eat the kaimitz betumah, then you chayiv for tumah. Rav Shimon mechayiv v'davar shedarchem lechel. Rav Shimon is mechayiv. He says this is limited. This isser of eating betumah and noiser is only b'davar shedarchem lechel. It's only something that a person normally eats. Aval ha'etzim v'halavayna v'aktiris, the wood and the levina, which is a kind of psamim. Aktiris is the mixture of psamim that were burnt every day. Ein chayav lehem mishum tumah. There's no chiyuv tumah on something that is not edible. So Zok the Gemara. That's what we're up to. Numi Rav Shimon mechayev eshadar chelecha. Rav Shimon had said that Yechayev, he's saying that Yechayev on that which is normally eaten. Itmar. Rabbi Yechon Reish Lakish, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yosi, Rabbi Chanina. Chad mehai zuzah v'chad mehai zuzah. You take one from each of these groups. Well, it's easy to remember. Rabbi Yechon and Reish Lakish are always on opposite sides. So we take one of Rabbi Yechon and Reish Lakish and pair them together with Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yosi and Rabbi Chanina. We don't know who said what. The only thing we know for sure is we know that there's a machlokes between two of these people, and Rabbi Yechon and Reish Lakish never agree. So it must be that Rabbi Yochanan is pairing up with one of the other two. Reish Lakish is pairing up with the leftover. Yeah. So chad mehai zuzah v'chad mehai zuzah. Chad Amar Machloikis betumas basar. So of these two shitas, one says that the Machloikis of Rav Shimon and the Rabbanan, that Rav Shimon says we don't say a chiyuv tuma on something that is not edible. The Machloikis is only on tumas basar. They're arguing tumas basar. That means if the carbon became tummy, not if the person became tummy. Everyone would say you don't get malchus. So I'm just going to say over where I've reached so far. It means we had the discussion earlier about karas, right? And that was what our Mishnah was talking about. We said, well, I don't know what our Mishnah was talking about, but we brought on the top, right? We said that there was a pasuk, 3 psukim that say karas, and there was a machlokes. We applied the machlokes of Shimon and the Chachamim about whether there's going to be karas on, and that was talking about a person who ate betumah. So that's what they're certainly arguing about. But now the question is, does that extend into two separate things? First of all, does that extend also into malchus, right? Something which is chayiv karas doesn't necessarily always. It's not necessarily that it has a chayiv malchus. And second of all, there's also a question: does this also apply to a tumas basar, where rather than the person becoming tamei, the kachim became tamei. Let's say the wood became tamei. Even though I would say I don't think wood can become tamei. It's pshutei klietz. Or a piece of wood, I don't think has the ability to become tamei, but I guess it's talking about the ketairis and the levina, which is aichel, which could become tamei.
Make a keli out of a wood, it's not going to become tamei?
Well, it depends, but we're not talking about the kli. We're talking about wood that was used for the fire. It was used for I don't think they took furniture or a cup and put it on the. I don't know if you could. But even, it depends what kind of kli. If you have like a challah board, which is pshuta klietz, it can't become tamei. I think maybe if it's a receptacle, then it's possible for it to become tamei. But anyway, in any case, let's not get sidetracked with this, because it's certainly not what this Gemara is talking about. So, one of these mandamim said, machloikas betumas basar. There's a machloikas in tumas basar. They're going to argue about, Shimon and Rabbi Elazar are going to argue legabi tumas basar when the object, even though we're not talking about basar here, we're talking about these non-edible things. So that Rav Shimon says it can't become tamei. It's not going to be chayiv. But betumas haguf divrei hakol ein aloika. But legabi tumas haguf, where the person is tamei, even though Rav Shimon said in our Mishnah, the Chacham in our Mishnah said that there is going to be a chayiv karas, they'll be maskim that there's no malchus. The Torah only said karas, but they didn't say legabe malchus. But there will still be a machlekes of tumas basar. B'chad amar k'machlekes bezu kach machlekes bezu. And the other man the amar between let's just say it as Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish and their sidekicks, they'll say the same machlekes will take place not just in tumas basar, but also in tumas haguf. They're also going to be chaylik about whether there's malchus or not. My timer, what would be the reason? So they're arguing really in the Chachamim, right? Whether the Chachamim are arguing on Rav Shimon, even in the case of tumas basar, tumas haguf, and the reason why they would say that the machlokes is going to be also in tumas haguf, legabi whether you get malchus, given since the Torah stelts to tumas haguf to tumas basar, right after the Torah says which is where we learn out that we could learn out that there's malchus. There is where we're saying everyone agrees by tumas basar that there's malchus, because the Torah says basar. That's the Rashi brings. That's the source for malchus on tumas basar, and the pasuk of tumas haguf is immediately adjacent to it. One is pasuk yates and one is pasuk chaf. So we say that you're going to have the same malchus also by Tumas Haguf. So that's so they're going to be arguing about whether the Chachamim also are going to say that there is a chiyuv, whether the chiyuv malchus will also extend to Tumas Haguf. Rav Tavyumi masni hachi, but Rav Tavyumi has a different. That's the way Rav Tavyumi understood this machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. Rav Kahana masni hachi. Rav Kahana had a different version. Chad me hayzuza v'chad me hayzuza as seifa. They're arguing in Rav Shimon, not in the Chacham. Chad ama machlokes b'tumas haguf. That one says that machlokes is in tumas haguf. Whether there's malchus, but tumas basar devei hakol loika. Everyone will agree in tumas basar you get malchus. V'chad ama machlokes b'zu kach machlokes b'zu. No, they say that no, it's not everyone's going to agree that you get malchus by tumas basar. There's a man Amar. Rav Shimon would say even by tumas basar there's no malchus, even though we have this pasuk of basar. Nevertheless, they're going to say there's no malchus. Amar Rava mistaver command Amar machlokes bezu kach machlokes bezu. He says l'chayra this in the second version l'chayra it would seem that Rav Shimon would argue even on tumas basar. My timer. Even the loy kabrina ritumasa al v'nechrasa loy karina be'abasa sheyiga b'chol tomei. He would say, since Rav Shimon has a drasha to tell you that it's not going to be chayiv, it's not going to be malchus. Since we don't have a pasuk, I should say, by tumas haguf to tell you get malchus, so l'chayra by something that's not nechal, something that's not edible, so it should extend according to Rav Shimon as well to tumas basar. What about the pasuk which comes to be mar ba'etzim levayna? So that's not telling you that there's a chiyuv malchus. That's just telling you that it's possible. Okay, like I said, I hope if anyone wants to join tonight at 8:30, I would love to clarify this a little more. I still have. I'm not entirely clear about where everyone stands on each one of these different positions. I certainly didn't say or fully understand what the limudim are and how they're arguing about the limudim. Zok the Mishnah. L'shem shisha dvarim hazevach nizbach. There are 6 things that you have to have in mind when you bring a carbon. L'shem zevach. I'm going to touch what all of them are. L'shem zevach, but the first one we're familiar with, right? It has to be when you bring the carbon, you have to have in mind which carbon you're bringing, right? If you bring a shlom, you have to have in mind l'shem shlomim. If you're bringing oila, you have to have in mind l'shem oila. L'shem zeveach, it has to be l'shem the bailam. You have to have in mind that it's being brought for who the owner is. L'shem Hashem. So all these things we'll explain in the Gemara. L'shem ishim. L'shem reach and l'shem nichayach. 4 other things. V'hachatas v'asham l'shem chet. If you're doing one of the karbanos that are being brought, they have an additional requirement. If it's something that's being brought as a kapara for a chet, you have to have in mind that it's coming for which chet. Amar Rabbi Yosi argues. Af mishalahei b'li l'shem echad mikol elu kosher. Shutnai bezdin. This is really this part is the preface to Rabbi Yosi Shita. Rabbi Yosi says, since the case is that even if someone didn't have any of these, none of these things are not ma'akev, that you have to have them or say them when you're doing it. She'ena machshava halechas b'liba l'shem echad mikol elu kosher shutnai bezdin she'ena machshava halechas ala achara ovid. He says that you shouldn't say anything because it goes normal. It's going to typically go. It's always the machshava of the. It only depends on what the person who's doing the avodah. It's not going to help what the bailam do lishmai. So we tell the kohen don't have any machshava at all, right? We say you should shecht it listam. And not to say the kohen should avoid anything, because like we say, the since his machshava has the potential to ruin this carbon, better he should do it stam and avoid the problem. So Rabbi Yossi is just arguing that we said the Ovid should say he should have a machshava, the proper machshava when he's bringing the carbon. Rabbi Yossi says better to be safe than sorry. Just do it stam. That way you avoid a problem.
Do we have this Rabbi Yossi with Pigel? Do we mention him?
Well, we've mentioned this Rabbi Yossi before. We definitely mentioned in general. I don't know if it was B'dafka Lagabi Pickle. We said, you mean he's saying that I don't remember. We said Rabbi Yossi he shouldn't have a machshava of zaman. A machshava chutz l'zman is certainly that's a maliciously bad machshava, right? That's a person who has him. But you're right. I seem to remember we said this Lagabi Pigel that a person shouldn't have in mind when he's going to eat it. That way you won't have a problem.
Yeah, I remember
we extended it to Pigel.
I remember you mentioned the idiot Chaim. He's better off not having any thoughts than a thought. I think it's from this Rabbi Yossi, right?
Right. You're right. I'm sure you're right that we did it. We applied the Gemara must have applied it to Pigel at some point as well. Zok the Gemara. Amrav Yudam Rav. Oila l'shem oila, lafuka l'shem shlamim. When you bring a oila, it should be l'shem oila and not l'shem shlamim. The loy. Isha l'shem ishim. When that's the first thing, right? That you should bring l'shem zevach means it should be l'shem oila. Isha l'shem ishim la'kuf la. When the Torah says oila, it tells you it has to be for the that it has to be for shem which carbon. And the pasuk also says this is also the pasuk. So we're going to dash in each one of those words. So isha means l'shem ishim. It's going to tell you that it has to be that the person brings it as a carbon, intending to burn it, whatever part's supposed to be burned, but not just to roast it. He shouldn't have in mind that he's going to cook it. He's going to grill it as a perfectly medium rare steak. He has to have in mind that it's going to be burnt up. Reach, l'shem reach, lafuke evarim shetzalan v'helam. That he wants to burn it, that when he's going to burn it, it's going to make a nice smell. Now, obviously the good smell from basar comes, like we said, when you're making the steak and you're making a medium rare. When you keep going, eventually it smells like most of our barbecues, like everything's burning. So if he has in mind that he's going to first roast it and get all the good smells somewhere else, and then after it's at medium rare, then he's going to bring it to the mizbeach, that's not good. So that's a bad machshava. Amar Rav Yehuda Rav, evarim shetzalim v'helam ein bohem mishum reich. If you first roast them and then you bring them, it's not a reich. Nichayach l'shem hanachas ruach. The nichayach is that it has to be that he's doing it having a mind to satisfy Hashem. The Rebbe Shalom gets nachas from the karbanos. L'Hashem, l'shem misha amma v'hayolam. And the final thing is that it should be for the Rebbe Shalom, that which seems like almost obvious. It's hard to see like how a person could have like it would all be good except then he thinks about Buddha. Like what else? What else would do? Yeah. What do you need a pasuk to tell you it has to be l'shem Hashem? Okay. Amar Yehuda Marav, chata sheshachtu l'shem oila psula, l'shem chulin. Okay, you know what? We'll leave this for tomorrow. This is a whole other kettle of fish. Okay, Shreich.
Thank you. Have a great day.